Welcome to the show, and we are back again with the esoteric principles of bodybuilding and the missing links. This is yours truly, Tyhson Banighen, the energy detective, the illuminator, bringing you and humanity into the light, and the host of the show, the hostess, the mostess, is Batista Gremaud, master bodybuilder and designer. And the hot topic today, which is really quite interesting, is mental health and addiction recovery. Wow, this is a big topic. So, how did we come to this topic, Batista?
Good question. I was going to actually lead with this, and it's not even a question that I put on your questions to ask. And the truth of the matter is, I don't know that there is a lot of people that are even very interested in the topic or think about it unless they have some type of a personal experience with the topic, right? And I have plenty of background in the topic of addiction recovery and mental health. And so I just want to first I want to say that I don't talk about this very much. Yeah. I never have. And I think that right now is a good time to kind of talk about it, to put things in, to connect the dots. And also when you look at the statistics in addiction and in mental health, it's staggering. I mean, it's really glooming. Teen addiction is on the rise. Suicide, overdose from opioids, painkillers. I mean, every neurodegenerative diseases, everything is on the rise. And so people are suffering, okay? And while I didn't like too much to talk about my own life, because it's, kind of painful, I decided that for the sake of these episodes, it would fit and it would make sense and kind of bring it together. So I won't take too long in sharing my own experience with it, but I will just put things into perspective so that it would make sense. Okay. So
well, first of all, I commend you. It's brave to start with your own personal experience, but that's really important for people to know that you have firsthand experience about this topic and will help deepen their connection to what it is that you're trying to communicate.
Thank you. Yes, and that's why I decided to jump in with both feet and not over intellectualize all this or whatever, Okay, so I grew up in a small farm in Switzerland, and growing up, there was a lot of paranormal things that happened. Understand that the little town in Switzerland where I grew up is very, very Catholic. Okay, we're talking super Catholic. And there's not much room for anything else. None of the here nowadays or in California, we know that there is more and there's an open-mindedness about spirituality and other dimensions and all this. But where I grew up, I wasn't like that. And but there were things that happened in my family. And there were things like apparitions and visions and messages for the world and things like that. So when it all started, I was 6 years old. And where it happened with my mother taking my brother, who is mentally disabled, to Lourdes, where there was, apparitions of the virgins and where people were being healed. And there she met a woman who was healed in Lourdes, and this woman had the stigmas of Jesus, where she almost died on Friday, and then she resurrected on Sunday, and she had the visions, and she saw Jesus, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is the environment I grew up in. My mother, who was an atheist, a survivor of the World War II and the Nazis' occupation in Holland, had to convert to Catholicism when she married my father. And when she met this woman who ended up living with us,
Wow.
yes, living with us, it became very intense. And in retrospect, I believe that it became an addiction to spirituality or to that world. Okay. In retrospect, now I have observed and studied, and really an addiction comes when you become separated to reality, when it starts affecting everybody around you, when it's destructive and you continue the behavior. That's kind of like my definition of addiction in a way. And that became our lifestyle. It nearly completely destroyed our family. My mother totally went overboard. She ended up having several breakdowns. I remember one time we had to call Interpol because she disappeared, and they found her in Italy, where she was on her way to talk to the Pope about all the things that were happening. My father totally broke down, jumped out of the window, broke all his bones when I was 10 years old. He recovered, but at that point, he didn't want to participate in the behavior anymore, so he pulled away, which brought an incredible amount of separation in our family. My sister turned out schizophrenic at the age of 20, and I believe that it's all related, even though when we were 4 years prior to that, we were both at the dance academy, and we were put into very strict diets, which my sister went overboard with it. And I think that has something to do with coming up with schizophrenia. And I'm going to talk about later this relationship between nutrition and mental health and all that. And my brother, the story goes that when he was 5 years old, he had meningitis and never recovered, and ended up mentally retarded for the rest of his life. That is the story that we told the world, but my mother, that wasn't her story. Her story was that because of all the events that were happening in our family, that someone had put a spell on her and her baby when she was pregnant with my brother, and so that was the result of my brother's mental condition. So as you can see, I have been overloaded with mental health my entire life. And as for me, I struggled with a pretty severe substance abuse addiction as a teenager. As the age of 16, I decided to leave home and to leave, because I felt like if I stayed there, then I would be crazy just like all of them.
Wow.
And that's how I left, and I pursued my road to happy destiny away from everybody. And it was probably the right thing to do, because at this point I feel pretty well adjusted considering where I come from. Okay.
Wow. What a story.
So it's been quite a journey, and so that's where I come from. Okay, so I have spent extensive research time on the topic. Okay, just not for my own sake, but like when my sister got diagnosed with schizophrenia, we tried. We researched everything to see how we could get her out of it, and we found some things that were helpful. I will talk about that. And over my entire life and my own search for my own sake, I researched the topic on addiction, on spirituality, understand that growing up in such a strict Catholic environment, there was a lot of issues for me with that, and that led me into the path of researching and studying spirituality and other religions, just to try to figure out what's up with that,
And where do you fit in?
Where do I fit in? I feel that right now I have some answers that I can really share to the world, because I'm more awake, I'm more aware, and I found a balance that's not overboard over here, not overboard over there. I feel, I'm not by any means, I don't say that I have achieved perfection and that I'm that spiritual guru or anything, and I'm no doctor. I'm just a regular person that just has a lot of experience in the topic, and I feel like I got a grip on it. And where I fit in is that I have something to share that could be of great interest or value and very helpful to a lot of people, because there is a lot of suffering.
Well, let's jump in.
Yeah. So the first thing that we need to be aware of is, and we talked about this in the prior episodes, is the role of the neurochemicals in the brain to feel good. Okay, so neurochemicals in the brain dictate how we feel, what we do, how we make decisions. Okay, and different neurochemicals have different responsibilities. For example, dopamine is like the pleasure neurochemical. I made some notes here. Serotonin would be the antidepressant. These are not natural substances that the body triggers all by themselves. You have GABA, which is a natural tranquilizer, and you have the endorphins, which are like a natural painkiller. These are like the main ones that people know about. So what happens is, when there is an imbalance in the brain from these neurochemicals, then it triggers feelings of depression, of sadness, irritability, anger, because we just don't feel good, right? So how do these neurochemicals become out of balance? There's many ways how they can become out of balance. It could be emotional trauma. It could be emotional trauma. It could be nutritional deficiencies.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of things. It could be lifestyle. It could be environmental toxins, for example. So there's a lot. Stress.
Hereditary.
Exactly, and stress, right?
Or past life, even.
In past lives, and all these things that we talked in the other episodes, emotions trapped in the body, or or a posture. If you're crooked, then the flow doesn't, it's the energies get stuck, so there's no flow, so it creates imbalances in the brain. So there's a lot of reasons why that happens. So when that happens, there is a chemical imbalance in the brain. So the natural reaction is for the person to try to bring balance back. And one of the easiest way to do it is to eat sugar or take a drug or go shopping, because addictions now is it's not only substance abuse. There's research that have been done that what we thought as addiction, as a drug, alcohol, substance abuse, tranquilizers, sedatives, things that we ingest, they found now that behaviors have the same effect on the brain. So that's how you have gambling addictions, sex addictions, or shopping, anything that gives you a kick of these endorphins to the brain, that creates that overproduction of endorphins in the brain, has the potential to become an addiction. And how do we become addicted to the substance? So what happens is, you take the substance, or you act in the behavior, whatever, and it shoots an excessive amount of these neurochemicals in the brain. But the brain knows that it's more than it needs. Okay? So what it's going to do is, you're going to have a big high, and then it's going to drop, because it's artificial, so it's not a natural wave of it. But the brain knows that you got too much, so it's going to shut down the production of the neurochemicals. It's going to not shut it down entirely, but it's going to decrease the production of it. Okay, so now the person needs to take a little more to get to the same amount of those neurochemicals. Over time, it decreases the production of neurochemicals progressively each time. So over time, it shuts it down entirely. And that's when the person becomes dependent. And that's how it goes from maybe, you know, taking a little bit, or being what you call them, like a social drinker or a social whatever, to go overboard into total overboard into having a dependence to it, because now the brain is not kicking in those neurochemicals anymore. So there is a huge connection between brain health and addiction, just because of the malfunctioning of the distribution of those neurochemicals. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's overwhelming when you think of how many kids have their heads buried in cell phones, for example, or into social media. So addiction is all around us, and there's so many opportunities to get addicted to so many different things, right?
Absolutely. And now, and teen addiction is getting more and more, you know, and I think it's connected with neurodegenerative disease, because when you think about it, if you start that young and you have all these, all of these addictive behaviors that affect brain health, and what is neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer, Parkinson, and all these diseases that are on the rise, it's a malfunctioning of the brain, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have to be entirely victims of this. And there's reasons why. Just like we talked, I don't forget if we talked about that when we talked about the postures on this. But you know, people think that bone is like static, and then once the bone degenerates, then you can't regenerate bone. It's not true. Bone is alive, and you can regenerate bone, and so is the brain.
Right.
Okay, and there's plenty of research now that shows that we can actually create new neurons in the brain, that we can create new pathways to the brain to regenerate the brain. And that's very, very exciting news, because now it's like there's hope, right? And there's more and more research on it. The little bit of research that I've read and then I know about in this field is the research that they've done on rats and mice, and it's done with putting mice and rats on a wheel. Okay, yeah. So that's how they research exercise and drug addiction and recovery. And of course, since it's on a wheel, then they relate it to aerobics activity, because that would be the closest comparison, right? But so I don't see how they can. I don't see how they can give a mouse a dumbbell, you know. I'm not sure how they can figure that out. But there's plenty of research in strength training now for other things such as health, diabetes, cancer, you know, just health, that I'm sure that the research now is getting very interested to know more about it, and somehow, somewhere, you know, they will find a way to find out more about that, because there's the problem rises, and so then there's also an interest in finding more solutions. So that's one thing, but there's more. Oh, and by the way, this thing about the brain regenerating, it's called neuroplasticity. Okay, so it has a term, it exists, it's proven, and it's well alive. So it's great news, but there's more. And that's something that when we were researching for my sister, for example, we did a lot of research in that field, because understand that at the time, my sister was a dancer just like me. So we were both very active in the dance world. So to say that just adding exercise was going to help or cure, you know, we were already extremely actively, physically, active with dancing. So we had to find other avenues, and so we researched the avenue of nutrition. And there is actually something that's really good news. I don't know if you're aware of it, or how much people know about this, but it's our gut, basically our intestinal tract and our gut, that has a lot to do with brain health and the production of endorphins and neurochemicals, because actually the gut is also referred to as a second brain. Did you know that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's three brains. There's the brain, there's the heart, and there's the gut, and they're all talking to each other.
Exactly.
In fact, the gut is actually a precursor to the brain. In other words, you feel things in your gut first, and then it sends signals to the brain. And when we think the brain is in charge, well, actually it isn't. It's what's happening in your gut. So you're absolutely right. Knowing how to manage our gut and really is learning how to manage our emotions.
Absolutely. And physically speaking, the gut, it's not only like an intuition or whatever, but inside the gut, there's millions of neurons, and the gut actually has the capability to produce all these neurochemicals also, and in very, very high quantities. So we can actually produce endorphins, serotonin, all these good chemicals that we once may think that it was only in the brain, but
Right.
they also originate in the gut. And we have some power over, we can control that to some extent through nutrition and exercise as well, but nutrition, because depending on what we feed our gut, it's going to produce bacteria and these chemical compounds that is going to produce these emotions and these feelings.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting because in the gut, the flora and the fauna, there's more actual viruses and other entities than there are actual cells. It's really quite overwhelming. Like we have a whole civilization going on in our gut, and when we don't eat the right things, then our emotions actually come from the species, their reaction to not having what they want, like sugars or starches or whatever, and those were the emotions that of depression or negativity or feeling hungry or overwhelmed. And so they're coming from little beasties inside of us, which is really quite fascinating.
it is fascinating, isn't it? So what are the foods, and I don't want to make this episode all about food. I just wanted to kind of touch on it a little bit because it is important. And I can tell you that when you start looking into it and researching, everybody has a different opinion of what is good, what to do, what not to do. And I personally, I think the problems come from excess. Okay, so we do excess in one area, and then we need to get rid of it. And because we get rid of it, then we have another imbalance. And this is how we get so out of control with all the do's and don'ts of dieting. Okay, so I know I grew up on a farm, and we ate from the garden, and we had the chicken from the farm, and we had so it's a little bit of a healthier lifestyle. And my mother was vegetarian, my father was not. So for me, it was never, oh, don't eat meat, or oh, do this. And again, I think that when you are overboard with any type of practices, including never eat meat or anything like this, then it also becomes type of a little bit of a addictive personality behavior. And to kind of emphasize that point, or to talk a little bit about this, I want to talk a little bit about eating meat and what how I feel about it. And again, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor, so what I'm sharing with you is based on my own experience, on my research, and my practical experience, and that's what I have to offer. But I can tell you that when I was studying Kabbalah, for example, and we would go to Shabbat, and we would have the Shabbat meal, and there was plenty of meat and fish and to eat. But the way and I want to offer this as a way to think about things a little bit differently. In Shabbat, we talked about when we eat the meat and we eat the chicken or we eat the flesh, the fish, that we have the power to actually raise the consciousness of that animal that we are actually eating. So the prayers and the prayers done over the food before we eat it is actually to raise their consciousness. So I want to bring this up because, you know, we talk a lot about, oh, we eat the meat and then we are getting the consciousness of the meat. But then at Shabbat, we eat the meat and we raise the consciousness of the meat that we're eating. So to me, the bottom line is it's all about consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing more important than blessing your food and blessing the water you drink. Absolutely. I mean, it will change the whole vibrational frequency. I totally agree with that. Blessing is really, really important. Whether you're blessing your vegetables or you're blessing your fruits or you're blessing your meat. Blessing
Absolutely.
is powerful.
Yeah. So on that note, I have to say that I don't eat meat. Personally, I do eat a little bit of chicken and some fish, but I prefer to eat kosher because I feel that it's a better quality. You know, they have been treating the meat, the animal with more respect. It's more humane. And also the way that they slaughter the animals is very respectful, and it's according to the traditions, and there's no suffering, and there is not any of that adrenaline rush that animals get when they are going to the slaughterhouse. As a matter of fact, when we did the research on my sister, for example, we took her to a hair specialist, and one of the discovery that he had made is that she had a really huge imbalance of adrenaline in the brain. Okay, and so he gave her a prescription of a whole lot of different vitamins to take to rebalance all that. But one of the things that was important for her at that time is to stop eating meat, because what happens is when the animals are brought to the slaughterhouse, they are flooded with an incredible amount of adrenaline because it's not pretty and it's very scary. And
Right.
so all that adrenaline goes into the meat, and then we eat the meat and then we eat that adrenaline.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with everybody, that the ultimate way to determine what's good for you is your body will tell you. So, I'm a vegetarian and I'm now moving away from all milk products as well. Why? Because I used to manage a raw milk dairy and I know what it is, what the cows go through, even if you love them. So, your sensitivity as it increases and changes, your diet will change automatically with it. It's not something that we have to go, follow a certain prescription or listen to this guru or take this latest diet. Your body, be sensitive to your body. Your body will tell you what you need. Sometimes
Yes.
you need to
Yeah.
eat. Sometimes it may be not.
Yeah, and to go along with that, for example, for a long time I studied the Bhagavad Gita. So in terms of food, the way the Bhagavad Gita teaches it is there is different types of food that have a different result on the system. So there is Rajastic, which is like spices, and I think it's chicken. I don't know if I'm remembering all that right. And then there is the tamasic food, which dulls the mind, which includes, I think it was mutton and alcohol, mushrooms. And then you have the sattvic foods that are ideal for brain clarity and spirituality, which include the grains, the vegetables, the natural foods, and the I believe even honey, nuts, And I believe, even if I'm not mistaken, dairy products, even that. And just a side note on dairy product is, because I like cheese, I'm from Switzerland, and I don't think I will ever quit it, is there is something to say about favoring goat cheeses just because it's a little bit easier to digest. So I'm just throwing that out. But I read something very interesting, and I just want to bring it up because it ties it in with the Kabbalah story about the meat. It says that in the Bhagavad Gita, they don't recommend, they don't eat meat, they don't eat pig, they don't eat any of this. But there was something that got my attention, and I wrote it down. I want to actually read this to you because it's quite interesting. There are exceptions to this rule, okay? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. I like
Okay. Okay, read this. These are the exceptions of when you should eat meat, okay? One may eat meat when it has been sprinkled with water while mantras were recited, or when you were engaged in a rite according to the law.
Wow.
Bhagavad Gita, and that brings us back to the Kabbalah, right? Where they bless the food and raise the consciousness of the food and all this. Wait, that's not it. He who eats meat when he honors the gods commits no sin, whether he has bought it or himself killed it. So if you're honoring the gods...
Yeah, if you're blessing the meat, I think is another way of saying it.
Yeah, that's it. But now listen to this one. This one made me laugh. But a man being dully engaged to officiate or dine at a sacred rite, refuses to eat meat, becomes after death an animal during 21 existences.
Wow. Wow. Yes. Well, it goes to show you just how many cultural beliefs there are around eating or not eating, or what to eat, how to eat, when to eat. And, and there's so many diets and prescriptions and whatever, it can get very confusing.
Exactly.
But it's your body. It's your body. Your body will tell you what you need. And everybody's body is different. So it allows you to tune in, which gets us back to, how do you think exercise help with mental health and addiction and help balancing all this in the body?
Exactly. So we have to go back to everything that we talked about in the last 4 episodes, not 5, because the first one was just the introduction. So we have to just first see that now there is research that says that we can create new neurons in the brain. That's the first thing, because otherwise, without a research, it's an opinion, right? If there's no research, it's just an opinion. So, but now there is research. So the first thing that we know is that exercise creates new neurons in the brain and has the ability to restore the synapses. The synapses are the spaces in between the neurons that transmit the information. So exercise has the ability to actually do that. So that's the first thing to think about. But now we need to go back to what we talked about, for example, in the grounding. The first episode that we did. If you're not grounded, if you live outside of your body and you're all in your head, then you're completely living up here, and you're not allowing all the energies to flow properly through the body and through the brain. So first, you need to be inside the body.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, exactly. Then we need to talk, when we have the information that we have, with all that we talked about, now we start connecting the dots, and now we can see how not only exercise, but how exercise done with intention And specifically with movements, the things that we talked about the emotion creating emotions, and all how these components can actually help the person to be sane and to actually be healthy in the brain, in the mind, but also to prevent relapses in addiction. Because you can be sober for a while, but what is sobriety? Sobriety is really balance. Okay, that's what it means.
Right.
It's not being sober and not engaging in an addiction and then completely being out of balance in another addiction, or being angry, or being, that's what they call the sober drunks. When you're sober and you're not taking any substances, but you are all over the place, you're angry, and you're like, that's not sobriety. Sobriety is balance. So when we know what creates the neurotransmitters to be out of balance, and we talked about that earlier, which could be trauma, emotional trauma, chemical, environmental toxins, and all this, or emotional trauma in the tissues, and we go back to what we talked about in terms of releasing those traumas. So now if we can use consciousness and an exercise like what we teach to actually help to release all that stuff. So not only you're going to create those endorphins that you need to be happy, but you're also starting to take action to release the emotions that are causing the problem.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And also you're grounding out the toxins, or you're allowing the toxins to be flushed from your body when you stimulate your muscles and exercise as well.
Absolutely. So it all fits in. And when you look at the statistics and what we know is, do you know anybody that's not addicted to something?
No, I think we're all addicted to, well, the mere fact we're on planet Earth and we're in what we call the matrix means we're addicted to a certain way of showing up. The fact that you go to a 9-to-5 job to earn money means that you're addicted to a belief system that's the only way you can support yourself. That's the only way you can survive. So we are all addicted to a belief system that we think we need to abide by in order to survive. So
Yes.
yeah, this is a really deep topic and an important one on multiple layers, to know that as a society we're addicted. We're addicted to growth. We're addicted to more is better. We're addicted to consumerism. We're addicted to consumption. And we don't want to give any of that up. Thank you very much.
That's right. So what I do is I try to, first of all, I go and I do my prescription strength training. It's grounding. It's wonderful. I feel great afterwards. And now you know why, because you have those neurochemicals, you have all these components that we talk about. And I'm repeating myself on purpose because sometimes it takes to hear the same thing over and over and over again until it clicks, And I know for me, I've been on this path of this prescription strength training for 10 years now, and I understand things a little bit more clearly now than I did in the beginning. But again, just as I mentioned last time, the person doesn't have to know all the ins and outs intellectually to get the results. Because really, by just doing it and taking the action without knowing all the details, the results will be there. And we worked with quite a bit of people that are in recovery, and we see the results, and it works, So there's the proof, again, is in the pudding. And I see it in my own life because, again, I don't believe in completely getting rid of anything. I believe that if we can find a balance, then things are better off at the end. And for me, anytime I try to get rid of something, like get rid of cheese or get rid of this or get rid of that, then my compulsive impulsive behavior kicks in, and now I need to do much more of it to make up for it. It's just you know.
Your body will tell you what you need. You will naturally decide you don't want to eat something because it doesn't feel right. It's not something that you are trying to restrict yourself from or trying to change your way of being. There's a very interesting comment here. I don't know if you want to take any comments, or maybe you want to,
Sure.
or maybe you want to deal with it after the show. But Lewis Peterson is saying, how do we deal? He says, first of all, his sister-in-law was just told that her second hip replacement surgery was a failure, and their body inside is auto-destroying itself from a bacterial infection, which must be a bit upsetting for him and the family. So that's the first comment there, and it's up on the screen. Don't know if you can see that. And then he goes on to say, how do we deal with her mentally to prepare her for the doctor's diagnosis now? Really devastating for the family. Any insights into what's going on here, please? Yeah, well, I'll just say something about this from an energy detective point of view, and that is, a doctor's diagnosis can be as overwhelming, physiological, neurologically, emotionally, than the actual disease or disorder. So it's really important not to get cut in the rhetoric of a diagnosis. A diagnosis is an attempt to come to an understanding of a disease and order in a prescriptive manner of attacking it in some way with some sort of usually chemical approach or a surgical approach. There's other ways to deal with this, and I'm not degrading the need for doctors or prescriptions or all of that. I'm just saying that what we're talking about here about a structural readjustment and diet is really a way in which you can bring about change in a much more gradual way. It's not going to be overnight. Anyway, that's my comment. I had to jump in. So back over to you, Batista. Do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And of course, now she's already in the situation, and so it's a matter of taking it from where she's at and moving forward. Okay, so that I totally agree with you. The first logical point to start is to start with the nutrition, because that will help with not only the health, the infection, the bacterial infection, but it's also going to help with the mood. On a deeper level, you can re-listen to the episode on every emotion creates an emotion, because we talked about autoimmune disorders, and we talked about when the body turns onto itself. It's a disconnection between the heart and the brain, where the brain doesn't, they both have a different agenda. So this is more on an emotional level. So you can really listen to that. And then, of course, when she gets better, I don't know what her lifestyle was prior to the hip replacement, but when she does get better and is able to move, to search some type of physical activity that she can start doing, because there is a great danger. I don't know how old she is, but if she's anywhere in her 40s, 50s, 60s, there's a great danger after surgeries of premature deterioration because of the lack of activity that starts going to affect bone mass and other things, so.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that there needs to be activity, even if it's not a lot, that she's got to keep moving. And that's the only way to deal with the toxins. It's the only way to get the chemicals that are out of her body that are adversely affecting her. I really strongly recommend looking into superfoods, and if you need some help around that, we can help you with that. Getting the right vitamins and minerals into the body so the body can self-heal is really one of the primary things to happen. But movement is important to detoxify the body so the body can rest and sleep deeply to recharge. So those are some of the things that we can offer. And of course, we're not doctors and we're not offering medical advice, but we are coming from a background of structural adjustment, energy healing, and also knowing a fair amount about foods and superfoods. So those are the sorts of things that we can offer, which are pretty straightforward, but can bring about some really deep change. And he goes on to say, Lois says she's 69 years old. Well, you know, I'm 73, so all things are possible. That's all I can say. And you can change your life around at any point.
Yes.
And she's diabetic and very poor diet. Well, there you are.
There you go.
Yeah.
Any exercise? Any exercise prior to the hip surgery? Probably not, huh?
Yeah, I don't. Thank you very much. Agree on the nutritional changes. Absolutely. And really encourage some exercise, Lewis, even if you go with her. You know, sometimes a pet can be encouraging, you know, if you have a pet and she gets excited about wanting to be with the pet, getting her outside to play with the pet, or even just moving around, playing with the pet, even if she's inside, it can really help as well. So movement, strong diet, high quality water, alkaline water to cleanse the toxins out of the body, flush them out, lots of water, lots and lots of water.
Oh yeah, and something about water and you know, and food. Drink the water away from food, because when you drink the water with the food, it affects the digestive process. So you want to drink the water before, or you know, after, not while you eat. And fruits by themselves, because fruits digest very quickly in the body. And if you eat fruits with other like meat or whatever else, then the digestion is going to digest the food first, and then what happens to the rest? It putrefies in the intestines and creates all kinds of bacteria and bad things you don't want.
Yeah, and Lewis goes on to say no exercise per se, basic daily walking around. Yeah, so any more exercise around that would be than just walking around would be great. You know, whatever way. Even going outside and you know, bare feet on the ground, grounding helps. Hugging a tree, being in nature, going to a park, sticking your feet in the water, you know, having a bath with Epsom salts to take the toxins out of the body. All these are simple things to do, but they're actually getting her in touch with her body, helping her fall in love with her body, helping her realize that her body is her temple, her spiritual the spiritual essence of how she can be on planet Earth. It's sort of like her space suit for the third dimension. And the more that she can love it, the more she can inhabit it, and the more the body will respond because it's being loved, and the more that her health will increase. So there we are. The exercises help mental health and addiction recovery. You wanted to talk a bit about triggers to relapse.
Yeah, so the triggers to relapse, that's, you know, some of the major triggers to relapse can be stress. And so we talked about that already. Yeah. We are inundated with stress. So what are we going to do first? We're going to just fall back into that pattern. And that, again, because stress affects the neurochemicals. So, you know, you always want to think about it like, how can I, like, and it's great what you said. Everything that you said with hugging the trees and this and that for stress reduction is great. But again, if you understand the power of the strength training or the bodybuilding, of how that impacts the physical body with tremendous amount of those neurochemicals, and gives you physical strength and emotional strength, it is such an amazing stress relief tool that you know, anybody can use as a tool for their in their toolbox. So stress is humongous. It's one of the main trigger to relapse. And then, of course, you have pain, whether it's emotional or physical pain. It's so easy to just reach for that pill or that thing, you know, because, and sometimes physical and emotional is related. One can affect the other. We talked about that. So again, learn to recognize where the pain comes from. Is it real pain? Is it imaginary pain? You know, where is it? And find ways to really be in charge, be in the driver's seat. And the way we do that, we get in the driver's seats by going to the gym with our prescription and getting rid of our emotions and And in terms of the physical pain, I don't know if you experienced that. I think that you mentioned something in one of the episodes that your backache is starting to get better.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, when I started going to the gym, trying to move off the equipment was really, really painful. The last time I was there, I was up and moving from one to the other. I ran up the stairs this afternoon from downstairs. I don't know when the last time I've done that. So yeah, there's something that happens. You just have more bursts of energy. It's great to feel younger and feel vital. So yeah, the pain, once you start doing the exercises and the body starts to adjust. And of course, I've been lucky. I have a friend that came and did really, really deep massage. That helped too, once you've done the exercise and then the massage, to get things back in place, because you stretch the muscles. It allows for the bones to go back to where they need to be, and a little bit of massage helps that. So I was really blessed in that way. So yeah, all of this is a way to be out of pain. This is the whole goal, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that's a big trigger or something that we can do to prevention and relapse of addiction. And then of course there's another huge one, is relationships, because we are so codependent to our relationships in our life, and a lot of times we get influenced by our relationships, and we do things that are not that really great for our health or our mental health or physical health, just because of the relationships in our life. And on that note, though, I'm not going to start talking too much about relationships right now, because that's going to be actually the topic for next week. And there's no one that can talk about relationships better than Dr. Fitness USA himself, as you know. That's one of his passions. And he always brings it back to the workout and how that dynamic works and all that. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. But it's definitely a trigger to relapse, and a big one.
Great. So this is really, I like the way that you were able to show that this is what we're talking about here, and addiction recovery is really builds on the 5 prior episodes about the need to ground, to be in your body, and the balance between the yin and the yang, the kundalini energy, the divine feminine, masculine, how strength training and structural readjustment allows that flow in the neural fibers to be balanced and that flow to happen. Posture in the chakras, so the chakras are rotating and are balanced. And like you said, every emotion creates an emotion. Every emotion creates an emotion, and every emotion can be released by emotion as well. So, yeah, thank you very much for a great show. That was a topic that really needs to be discussed more in our culture, and for some reason we tend not to want to talk about it.
That's right. Who wants to talk about how messed up we are in the head?
That's right. All right. Well, you know that we're messed up in the head, I'm going to go to the gym.
There you go. Have a good time.
All right. Thank you. It was a great show.
Thank you.
Place, same time, Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard. Join us. So see you then. Until then, be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And don't forget, go to the gym. See you next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
This 13-episode series, The Esoteric Principles of Bodybuilding, The Missing Links to Fitness Consciousness, with your host, Batista Gremaud, master builder, bodybuilder, and designer, is co-hosted and produced by Tyhson Banighen and his guides, www.thewellnessshow.ca. And see, the same time, same place, every Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard. See you then. Bye for now.